Hello everyone, welcome to AI Seeking the Truth. It is pretty much our backup channel to Abnormal Investigations. If you have not joined this channel, I'd ask you to subscribe and ring the bell because there's a lot of people getting their channels demonetized right now and removed. So if you want to stay up with this and be on our backup channel in case something happens to the original channel, this is where we would move to. So make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell, and if you don't mind, smash the like button to help us get it out there. And we want to continue to grow. That way we'll at least have two strong channels in case something happens to one, because you never know. I mean, there's been two large channels right now that has actually been demonetized over talking about certain issues. So let's jump into this off the rails encounters we get over here, guys. We got Kaylee in the house sitting here beside me, but she ain't gonna talk. She's just gonna stare at me, but she'll smile at me. Alright, let's get into this encounter. Every summer, my family would embark on a 2-day road trip from Washington State to visit our relatives in Minnesota. I cherished these trips despite the long hours spent in the back seat of our 1972 Pontiac Catalina. As we arrived at my cousin's 100-year-old farm, I was always excited to explore the property. We'd climb into the old red barn, play tag in the hayloft, and investigate the old railroad boxcars used for storage. We'd climb trees, play kick the can, and ride our bikes up and down the old farm roads. One summer, when I was 12, my cousin told me about a forgotten graveyard he had discovered. So, we decided to hike to the graveyard, exploring the Minnesota landscape along the way. As we walked, we passed through cornfields, quarries, and wooded areas. The graveyard was hidden beneath a massive rose bush. As I carefully made my way inside, I saw the first tombstone dated back to the 1800s. I soon discovered more tombstones, all bearing the same last name. It was a family graveyard, where farmers had buried their kin for generations. As I explored the graveyard, I came across 7 small white tombstones with the lambs etched above the inscriptions. These were the graves for children who had died from the same disease. I felt a deep sense of sadness, imagining the pain the parents must have felt burying their children. As the sun began to set, my cousin and I headed back to the farm. As we walked, the shadows cast by the setting sun made everything look different. I was relieved to see the farm in the distance, but as we approached the house, a thunderstorm was brewing in the distance. That night I woke up to the sound of a moaning like you didn't want to hear. At first, I thought it was just a storm. But then I looked out the window and I saw something that made me almost freeze. In a flash of lightning, I could have sworn I saw children running and hiding in the grass. I woke my cousin, and we both saw the same thing. We were convinced that we were seeing the ghosts of the children we had seen in the graveyard. We were frozen in fear, unable to move or to speak. As the storm passed, the moaning stopped, and the house grew quiet. I drifted off to sleep, but I was awoken again by the sound of footprints running back and forth across the floor. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move, and unable to speak. As I lay there, I felt a deep sense of sadness and regret. I whispered, "I'm sorry," over and over, unsure if I was apologizing for disturbing the rest of the children in the graveyard or for the pain they had endured. As the sun rose the next morning, the strange occurrences ceased, and the house grew quiet once again. As we went downstairs for breakfast, our parents asked if we had been running around upstairs during the night. They had heard footsteps, but we knew that we hadn't been the ones making the noise. As we sat down for breakfast, I couldn't shake off the feeling of the unease. The events of the previous night had left me with a sense of dread. I glanced at my cousin, and he seemed to be feeling the same way. Our parents asked us about our hike to the graveyard, and we told them about the strange tombstones and the feelings of sadness that had settled over us. But we didn't mention the ghostly apparitions or the footsteps in the night. We didn't want to worry them or make them think that we were crazy. As we finished breakfast, I couldn't help but feel that something had followed us back from the graveyard, something that didn't want us to forget the pain and suffering of the children who had died there. I tried to push the feeling aside, but it lingered in the back of my mind as we spent the rest of the day helping out around the farm. I couldn't shake the sense of being watched. It wasn't until we were getting ready for bed that I realized the truth. The graveyard had been more than just a scary place in the middle of nowhere. The graveyard was a place we shouldn't have went. The graveyard had been more than just curiosity. It had been a warning that some places are better left alone. As I laid in bed that night, I couldn't shake that feeling. But then I started to feel ill, and I started to feel sick. So did my cousin. We both ended up in the ER the next day with what they called walking pneumonia. The doctor was talking to us, and we was talking to the doctor, and somehow the graveyard came up, and he looked at us and smiled and said, "Well, you two just don't know how lucky you are. Back in those days, what you have would have almost been a sure death. But now that we have better antibiotics and better ways of taking care of you, you two will be up and running in no time." As we was on our way home, I could not help but wonder, did the little kids that came back from the graveyard, did they bring us their sickness and give us what had took their lives? Did we mess with something that we shouldn't have messed with, and did it follow us back and make us sick? As far as I'm concerned, graveyards are nowhere to play. Yeah, I would agree. You don't want to play in graveyards, and that's disrespectful, I think, to play in a graveyard. It's different if you're in there, being respectful, but not to go there to get scared or play. What do you all think? Let me know in the comments what you think about this one. Did something follow them back? Did something make them sick? Or do you think it was all coincidence? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for listening, guys.